I don't know if you caught Manchester United Everton last
did.
night.
Yeah.
I will never know how Manchester United didn't manage to get a goal on the boards.
I didn't think they were great though. Did you?
No, I didn't. I think he's got a lot, and he's got an awful lot of puzzles to solve.
Yeah, no pace to their game.
Yeah.
No energy behind their game. Just, we knew once Everton had got this ridiculous sending off, and whatever we think about that, I'm sure we'll discuss in a minute.
Yeah.
It was clear that they were going to make the game difficult for United, and that's what they did. And United didn't do enough. They created opportunities, but there was no cut to their game. There was no energy to their game. There was no movement of the ball quickly. So, they've got their work cut out. And to lose 1-0 at home to Everton, a 10-man Everton, is a poor result, given the fact that United was showing green shoots of recovery, or the perception of green shoots of recovery.
Yeah, a first win at Manchester United in 18 attempts for David Moyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose there is no sweeter victory in the Moyes archives than that. I mean, 11 years on from his sacking, I don't know, have both Moyes and Manchester United somewhat gone full circle?
Clearly.
Moyes left United with his side in 7th. Everton and Manchester United this morning sit joint 10th. I mean, that's how it's gone, isn't it?
I mean, it's clearly a circle for David, because he's gone out of Everton to Manchester United and is now managing Everton against Manchester United.
Yeah.
Trying to compete with the Manchester United of the world, albeit the Man United of the world that he was competing with during his 10 years at Everton was a powerhouse. This is one that's rebuilding like they did in the 70s and 80s and 90s to get themselves into a position where they became the powerhouse of the Premier League. So David's gone full cycle. I don't know whether you see that as progress. I mean, David Moyes is a brilliant manager. I've always liked him.
Yeah.
I liked him when he was at Preston. I like him as a fella. And I think he's done good jobs wherever he's gone. There's been a few instances where he's come up short. I think probably the Sociedad experience wasn't a great one for him, and I don't think he made a great fist of it at Sunderland. But most of the time, David is a top-drawer manager. He's rehabilitated himself. I think the Man United experience was inevitable. It was inevitable. Everybody, without saying that...
How do you mean inevitable?
Coming after Alex Ferguson,
yeah,
it was inevitable. Most sensible people would have gone, ooh, I'll leave that for a couple of managers' time, because we're following in behind somebody that's almost unfollowable. Ferguson was unfollowable. Because in order,
no one's unfollowable.
Well, it was a bit like Brian Clough's analysis when he took over from Don Revie. I want to do better than you.
Yeah.
And Don Revie saying, well, you can't do better than me. We only lost 2 games last year. We said, well, I only want to lose 1 then.
I think he would have done better if he'd been given more time. He would have proven that he had the credentials.
No doubt. That's not the argument I'm advancing. The argument I'm advancing was the expectation of Manchester United was not to have a transition period. Of course, David Moyes should have been given more time. Time has told us this. Evidently, time has told us this.
Yeah.
Ruben Amorim is being given more time for less deserved reasons than David Moyes was given. David Moyes walked in off the back of Ferguson, the championship-winning side, with the expectation. Man United's fans are grateful for the team turning up.
Yeah.
They're grateful for players running about now.
Yeah.
If David Moyes was the manager of Man United now, he'd be an all-conquering hero, rather than somebody that was considered not good enough after 7 months. So, of course, David should be given more time. But my point is that anyone that followed Ferguson wasn't going to be given any time.
No.
Because the Man United fans weren't beaten down to a nub. They weren't suppressed into the thinking that ultimately any kind of performance on a field is something they should be grateful for now. They were still the all-conquering Man United.
Yeah. What we did see was a very strange event in the 13th minute of the game. We've seen it before, actually. It's not a strange event. We've seen this before. Idrissa Gueye was sent off for slapping his teammate Michael Keane 13 minutes on the clock. Now, Guy completely lost his head and had to be restrained by teammates. The incident sparked when Guy played a loose ball in the Everton penalty area, and it led to a chance for Bruno Fernandes. Now, Guy apologised after the match, but he slaps Keane and then he gets sent off. Yeah. Now, in the IFAB rule book, Simon, a player who, when not challenging for the ball, deliberately strikes an opponent for any other person on the head, or any other person on the head or face with a hand or arm, is guilty of violent conduct unless the force used was negligible. So off he went. It says in the rule book he's got to go.
He's not an opponent, is he?
So he went.
The language is very ambiguous because he's not an opponent, he's a teammate.
Right.
I mean, I've been a massive critic of Michael Keane. I've got this sort of image in my mind of the airplane scene when they queue up to smash the woman in the face with a cricket bat, a baseball bat, whatever they could possibly do. And seeing Michael Keane play it sometimes, that's what I felt like doing to him.
Yeah.
But I don't play on the same team as him.
Yes.
I actually watched it and thought, is there a necessity to send a player off for this?
Exactly.
Given it's an altercation between 2 players of the same side.
You think there should be discretion?
Well, I think there should, common sense, but also the optics of the sport are massively important. Bringing it into disrepute. Now, you go back to when Lee
Boyer.
Bowyer, of course, and who was it? Was it Jenas?
Kieran Dyer.
Kieran Dyer. Sorry, Jermaine. You have your own problems and have to need to plumb on you. The idea that was something that was palatable, because that was a full-on fight on the field.
Yeah.
And so you've got to deal with that situation. This was a flashpoint between two players that were very hyped up early in a game that was full of focus, and probably Moisey had charged them right up for the very reasons that you spoke about, which is Moyes going back to Man United and wanting to get results.
Yeah.
Send his team out to be motivated, and they've got involved in an altercation, and my nose tells me that it feels like an overreach. It's unnecessary. It doesn't feel like common sense. It feels like, pack it in, you two. Yellow cards anymore, even a cross word between one another, you're going off.
Exactly.
That's what it felt like to me.
I agree, Simon. So just to re-emphasise that rule, a player who, when not challenging for the ball, deliberately strikes an opponent or any other person on the head, yeah, there's the part. Or faced with the hand or arm, is guilty of violent conduct unless the force used was negligible. It was pretty darn negligible anyway. It was one of those. Have a slap in the side of your head.
It feels like, but then again, you get into this area of we cannot allow. We are caught as refereeing supporters to some extent, which is what we are. In the ideal of subjectivity.
Yeah,
it's funny. I was watching a clip the other day of Brian Clough having a long conversation with John Motson, and I think it was about 79, where he was going at Motson about TV coverage, and you lot should just shut up, play more football, and less commentary. Have you ever seen that one?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. But he talked about refereeing, and he said, "You lot make refereeing an impossible job. These referees cannot do their jobs because of you lot inside the studios." I'm not suggesting this is what I'm doing with that. What I'm saying is we go back 46 years.
Yes.
And the leading figure, one of the most controversial figures in football, Brian Clough, was talking about how referees were given a hard time. Now, roll forward 46 years, it's off the clock. That was 1979. Referees were getting slaughtered. Now go forward to 2025, where you've got angles every single where. No one tolerates one single mistake by a referee. And then talk about subjectivity.
Yeah.
I'm arguing for subjectivity. Because the moment we allow referee subjectivity, some clever sod over here turns around and goes, hang on a second, that subjectivity didn't work for me.
Exactly. I was keen to find out what the man said. I watched the whole game, then I thought, I want to hear Moyes and I want to hear Amorim. So let's hear both of them now.
Quite pleased they were fighting each other, because it showed me that they cared, and it showed me that there was a bit of that, and that's what's in Everton. We're trying to demand higher standards from everybody. So I can't quite work it out if it was Keane's bad ball or if it was Ghana's bad ball to Keane, or whatever they were annoyed with each other with. But if we hadn't got that fight and that resilience like what they showed, we'd have never get through the rest of the game.
Fighting is not a bad thing. Fighting doesn't mean that they don't like each other. Fighting is that you lose the ball, I will fight you because we will suffer a goal. That was my feeling when I watched. I don't agree with that sent-off. So I'm going to say that it was, we can fight with a teammate. I know it's a violent conduct, the referee explained. I don't agree with that. I hope my players, when they lose the ball, they fight each other. Now they cannot do it, it's a send-off. But that is a good feeling, not a bad feeling.
See, I like that. I like both of those points of view. Now, I don't know why the referee, Tony Harrington, didn't go down last night as being remembered for the guy who applied common sense.
Sure, but then he'd be the guy that didn't follow the rule book and be castigated for it somewhere along the line. See, I agree absolutely about holding people to high standards. I agree with holding your colleagues to high standards. Hold yourself to high standards.
Yes.
And make sure you demand the very best, which is what Roy Keane and overreached with Mick McCarthy back in the days in Sapong, didn't he? When he went beyond the pale and got a little bit too carried away with himself. I agree with the sentiments of exacting support. I think out of conflict, more often than not, can come creativity and can also come a different way of thinking about things. But there's a balance. You can go too far. You can have situations where conflict becomes part of it, and fighting is not a bad thing. They always talk about the dressing room, pinning people up against the dressing room, managers being prepared. Ferguson traded on a currency of ultimate violence, albeit verbal, booted a boot into David Beckham's face, who made a 4-out play out of it, and had the hairdryer, right? So that was an underlying violence, wasn't it? An underlying sentiment of fear. So it pervades the sport. But it has to be just the balance, because if you don't retain some sort of order, then you will have free-for-alls, and all of a sudden the Premier League will start bringing itself into disrepute. So it has to get the balance right.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, Moisey, probably if his team had lost, he'd have something different to say about it.
True.
But they didn't. They won.
They won.
Exhibiting a fighting spirit, so he takes the positive from it.
Simon, I take on board everything you've said there this morning. The red card of Idrissa Gueye last night, the Everton player at Old Trafford, was it necessary? Should he have been sent off so soon into the game after slapping the face of one of his colleagues? It really is a strange one, isn't it? Adam in Letchworth, he had to be sent off, Jim. If the rules are not allowed, players will inevitably have more leeway to argue their case. He said you can't let it go. You have to apply the rules. And the rule is, yeah, it was right. He was sent off. But can we not use a bit of discretion? The rule again, a player who, when not challenging for the ball, deliberately strikes an opponent or any other person on the head or face with the hand or arm is guilty of violent conduct, unless the force used was negligible. I would argue it was negligible, but others would argue those are the rules. You've got to abide by them. Do we have to abide by them? It's certainly a split opinion this morning, has it not? Dean's an Everton fan. Dean, good morning. What did you think of this?
Yeah, good morning. You know what? It was a little altercation. The referee should have, you know what, he would have been more commended for showing a bit of common sense. Everything should be black and white. Let's have it right. This is an entertainment business. We all enjoy watching the football. And when it went down 10-11, it was like, this is supposed to game, this.
Yes. I agree. I mean, I'm with Dean on that. A bit common sense. Why not just apply it? Even if we hear from Harrington, the referee, afterwards for once, this is why I didn't send him off. Then we all know, Simon. What? Go on, Dean.
He said it was the third time in Premier League history that's happened. There was a Bowie Dyer incident. There was somebody else when it happened. But, you know, it wasn't a sparring session, was it? It was a bit of passion getting shown between...
Yes. Just lost Dean there. I agree with Dean there. I don't know if you, Matt. Matt, good morning. It's a Leicester fan who joins us live. What did you think of it?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. To be honest, I've not even seen it, but I'm just so weary of the whole referee discussion at the end of every weekend.
Yeah.
This week it's common sense. Let's get it straight. The guy made the right decision. The rules are there. By the rules, he made the right decision.
Yes.
But now we want common sense. The problem with common sense is it's not common. It's not common to each person.
Right.
Everybody's opinions differ.
That's
common
right.
sense is not ubiquitous.
That's right.
And then next week we want consistency. And then, we're being too harsh. We need common sense again. And this isn't just England. It's the same in Spain, in Germany, in Italy, in France. And do you know what they see the gold standard as? English referees. Why can't our referees be more like the English referees? They are the best of the best. There isn't this secret cache of world-class referees. So either all referees around the world are completely incompetent, or discussions like this every week just show what an impossible job it is. Can we just, it's like I said, it's just so weary.
Simon, what do you want to say about that? I think he's raised some great points.
But he's absolutely right, and it's the point that I raised earlier on. It's a point that I've repeatedly raised. I don't want to defend bad refereeing because it should have consequences, but we are in a situation where referees can't referee, and it isn't helped. I'm not going to just make this about Arteta, but Arteta made the conversation 18 months ago where he talked about the standard of refereeing and then highlighted about the European refereeing being of a higher standard, which wasn't true and isn't true. So that's a sort of seeding a narrative that gets pervaded through our media, our punditry, and all of a sudden the referees can't do right for doing wrong. We should be in a situation where referees are allowed to make a subjective decision based upon the commercial expertise they bring to bear. But if they do that, some clever sod is going to come out and say, I don't want subjectivity, I want absolute adherence to the rules. And he was right to send the player off by the rules, but he was perhaps wrong to send the player off by the nature of using some judgment, some objectivity, and dispensing it in a game that sometimes lacks some of that.
Yeah. Is there any difference, do you think, Simon, the fact that it's two teammates? The guy didn't go up to, say, Bruno and gave him one on the side of the head. Would you have a different view of that this morning?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think this is a completely different dynamic. I mean, you're not intimidating the opponents. You're not trying to create a different outcome in the game. You're actually having an altercation with your colleague.
Yeah.
Now, you're sending somebody off because you're adhering to the rules. And as the caller just said, if there is no such thing as common sense, it's much trotted out, oh, that's common sense. This person speaks common sense. Well, it isn't common sense. Sense isn't, views of things isn't, as he said quite rightly, ubiquitous. Everyone has a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
If you think about things sensibly, I think sensible views is a better way of deploying an observation about what is common sense. I think sensibly speaking, the referee should have the bandwidth to be able to go, well, I don't like what I've just seen, and I'm going to deal with it, but I don't have to send a player off to do it.
Right. I mean, it's like a flare-up in the training ground, isn't it? Oh, passion. That's what I love to
But
see.
the,
Passion.
but the referees can't do right for doing wrong.
No.
Because they get given a rule book. If they don't, if they even half the time, the very people that are slaughtering the referees don't even know the rule book.
Yeah.
They don't even know the understanding of the rule. Every now and again, you get someone like Danny Murphy that comes in and tells you the rules of this, actually, by the way, and clarifies it for people's thinking. But half the players on the field, we saw this with the handball rule a couple of years ago. You asked a selection of players, did a vox pop of players, none of them knew the bloody rule.
No.
Yeah, they're the first one to criticise.
Phil, good morning. You've been waiting patiently. Sunderland fan, what did you make of it?
Good morning. Thanks for having us on, gents.
Morning, Phil.
I think you're absolutely bang on. It's not just about common sense. And do you know what? If that referee made that decision yesterday morning, that referee is getting an absolute whooping. He really is. He can't do right from wrong.
Yes, yeah.
And he would have. And do you know what? I know what you're saying, Jim. At the end of the day, about obviously that is a sensible decision. And I agree with all of that. But that referee would probably got disciplined, and at the end of the day, that's his job. That's his job. And
if he hadn't sent him off, Phil, he'd have been marked down for it. Yeah.
Well, exactly, and then he's going to get disciplined for that, and that's the problem. That's the problem with it, and obviously all the attention that the referees get. Simon's bang on. They can't make a decision. They can't make a decision because they get absolutely trolled.
Sure.
Right, left, and centre.
Good call, Phil. Thank you for that. I think it's only fit and proper that we finish with an Evertonian, and Ian is that Evertonian. Ian, good morning. What did you think of it?
Good morning, gents. Yeah, I just thought it was massively refreshing to hear both managers basically say, "I like a bit of that."
Yes.
It's a passionate game.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
And I totally understand. I see Simon's point of view, always obviously a great counter sort of opinion. Basically, what he's got to adhere to the rules, but at the end of the day, we need a bit of that. It was fantastic. It made it for a better night.
Yeah.
And I do have to touch on a slightly different point. Coupled with the fact that we've jumped above the Reds, it was just a fantastic night for all Evertonians. And I just think it added to the spice of the game. We all this woke stuff, we need a little bit of passion.
Would you say that
going out the game?
Be honest with me, and before you leave us, would you be saying that this morning had Everton lost?
No.
There you go.
No, I just think from Everton's point of view, obviously, as I say, I've touched on the fact that both managers were very much for what happened.
Yes. Ian, good call. Thank you for that. We'll stick with Manchester United for the time being, Simon. 10th this morning, 11 points off the lead. But what that defeat meant last night to 10 men Everton was that it ended their 5-match unbeaten run. And I think that concerns Amorim for more reasons than one.
I feel afraid of returning of this feeling of last season. That is my biggest concern. So we need to work together. We are going to work together. The players are trying, but we need to be better. So we have training tomorrow, and we are going to prepare the next one.
You know, when they lose, Simon, after an unbeaten run that they've gone on 5-match, you can hear what he's saying there. I am slightly concerned we go back to our old ways. I feel afraid of returning to this feeling of last season. That's my biggest fear. So as a result of that, do you think with Amorim at the moment, it's always a case of, yeah, well, exactly, one step forward, two back?
I just don't think they're a very good size. I think they're a side with some good players in it, but I don't think they're a very good team. I think a lot's made of systems and the way that he wants to play. But I think we have to look at the effectiveness of the players, move past the system and get to, they're good enough to deliver outcomes. I mean, if you watch Man United in the games, a lot of them have been draws. So this idea that they've been on this wonderful win run is not really there, is it? They've drawn 2 of the 5 games that they were unbeaten in. I mean, the opposition they've played against Liverpool are all over the place. And whilst it looks great on paper, the Liverpool result, we can see that Liverpool are getting beat with their boots on week in, week out, aren't they? You look at Sunderland, and okay, they were lucky in that game, in that Sunderland game. That was a much more difficult game than the outcome suggested. Yeah. And they drew with Forest, who weren't in good order, and Spurs, who, again, seemed a little bit of a mixed bag. They got Palace on the weekend. Difficult game. Palace are a difficult side to play against. It's at Crystal Palace, and whilst the Palace were poor against Wolves and didn't have much to beat Wolves, sorry about that, Rob Edwards. See you in the Championship. The idea that
you're not going to let that go.
Man United are a good side is away with themselves. Now, he doesn't have any pressure, does he? He doesn't have any pressure. He's been told he's got as much time as he needs by Jim Ratcliffe. Whether that's wise or whether it's stability, who knows? Time will tell. I would suggest that Man United need to see some significant progress this year and need some sort of qualification for Europe. And what that looks like may well be sixth. I always felt that United would know they weren't going to get relegated this year, as some people were suggesting, and they weren't going to occupy the bottom 4 spaces.
So, what would test that 2-year commitment that Sir Jim has placed on Amorim?
Well, a season like last, I suspect. I mean, I think they are better than they were last year. I mean, obviously, up until we saw them against Grimsby, we saw them against Brentford, they were poor against Brentford. We saw them against Grimsby, and they were poor, really poor, and lucky to have stayed in the competition. To have got themselves into a situation where they actually stayed in the game, let alone, got themselves to a penalty shootout that they lost.
Yeah.
The fact is that United are still a shadow of themselves. They're still the team that occupy a huge amount of precedence, but their own fans seem to be very relaxed about Amorim, from what I can gather. He seems to be given a significant amount of
wriggle room,
latitude to be able to achieve things. I look at players like Mason Mount that are shadows of themselves. They're miles off what they once.
One game a week, though, Simon. I mean, I think top 4 is the bare minimum.
If you're a good side, yeah.
No Europe, no nothing else. One game a week.
But this Man United side could have one game a month, and they're not good enough. They're not a good enough side. And they're not good enough to compete with the sides that are above them right now. They'll be good enough in moments, and of course, this idea that one game a week is advantageous. Of course, it'll be advantageous. Of course, winning is advantageous as well. And if you're playing 1 game or 2 games a week and you keep on winning, the momentum carries forward. People talk about momentum. It's all about momentum. Arsenal have got Bayern Munich this week, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've had a big North London derby on the weekend. If they win these games, you won't hear. The only time you hear about players and about managers and about fixture lists is when people start losing games. And then you start hearing about it. United have 1 game a week, and that should give them an advantage over jaded sides that aren't able to function at the level that United are, because United are fresher for these games. But these sides are better. So they already have this 20% margin where the fatigue is compensated for by the fact they're a better side. So United, to me, are still a long way away from anything resembling anything that's really significant.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I do. I mean, I'm just trying to think when what would prompt Sir Jim to reflect on the commitment that he's made to Amorim and think, maybe I was wrong.
It's not worth the paper.
Maybe I was wrong.
It's not worth the paper it's written on, is it? I mean, the commitment is as good as the guy's performances. Yes, he wants to be able to quell the background noise. He wants to be able to suppress the rumour mill that somehow this manager's in jeopardy, to be able to get some sort of order in the dressing room so the players don't get ahead of themselves thinking they haven't got to play for this manager.
Yeah.
That's in part what the messaging is there.
But Ratcliffe didn't go public for nothing, did he?
Well, I think Jim Ratcliffe didn't go public full stop. I think he answered a question. I think he sat there doing an interview with media sources that he likes to do with, and he does it in a way that suggests that he has a viewpoint that he wants to impart. And part of that was, I think over the time, come on, Jim Ratcliffe is one of the most intelligent, gifted commercial men that this country's ever seen. But when he comes out with crap about Man United running out of money, you wonder why he'd say that.
Yeah.
Why'd you say that?
Exactly.
It's not true. So why say it? And it's no truer that Amorim is going to be given 2 or 3 years to build a side. If Manchester United aren't building a football team that's capable of competing inside the Premier League, then eventually their brand will erode. And the very things that attracted the Glazers to this free opportunity for themselves, and the very things that Ratcliffe wanted to be associated with as a shiny, successful thing, will mean that the manager has to deliver some sort of outcome. And if they don't finish inside the top 6 this season, I'd be gobsmacked if Amorim was still there.
Yeah. Can you believe it? 5 years ago today, we lost Diego Maradona, who passed away at the age of 60. 20 years ago to this day, we lost George Best at the age of 59.
Yep.
Diego Maradona and George Best. Where do you start, Simon? Are these 2 iconic names that forever will stand the test of time?
Oh, I think so. I happen to be in the camp that I think Georgie Best was the greatest footballer to ever grace a football field for a period of time.
Why?
Because I just think he
why
was
go that far?
Because I think he played in a time when football was very different, on pitches against opposition that were much more robust, against defenders that operated at a very different level. We had to deal with the Ron Harrises of the world, the Norman Hunters of the world, the Dave Mackays of the world, and all these sort of people. I just think that George Best, for a period of time, probably from 67 through to 70, was without doubt the best player on the planet. I don't care what they say about Pelé and Eusebio. And I think playing in English football has always proven to be the most difficult, most physical league. And look at the way that he played. Look at the ability he had. Look at the team that he played in. You know, you have obviously got the Holy Trinity with Dennis Law and Bobby Charlton. But George Best, I mean, obviously, he in his later life had challenges and challenges about the circumstances in which he existed. But as a footballer, what a footballer, what a player. You know, look at, I mean, again, the pitches that he played on, the English football, the ability that he had. I just think he was a remarkable, remarkable footballer. I think he'd put them all to shame if he was playing in modern football.
Oh, these days, if you put some of the present day players in front of a screen and say, watch that, when he gets hacked, the way he get hacked, and still stays upright.
Size of the fella. He was a very small, and not particularly well built, but to ride some of the challenges, that the people were trying to put upon him and physically put upon him all the time. I just think he was remarkable. Maradona was a product of his time and a wonderful footballer. I remember watching him go to Napoli and being amazed when you started to see Italian football filter through on British TV. Some of the goals that he scored. And he could, take care of himself. You saw the Battle of Barcelona, didn't you, when he was playing in that match where I think it was against Valencia or something that was just almighty.
Athletic Bilbao, I think.
Atletico Bilbao,
Goycochea. Had a go at him. I remember trying to get close to Maradona to try and get a question to him in 1986 at the World Cup finals in Mexico and not getting anywhere near to the man in question.
I remember seeing him play, I think it was in 1980, and they were raving about this 19-year-old kid coming over, and he was playing in a friendly against England at Wembley. I think England won the game 3-1. And Kenny Sampson was left back, and Kenny Sampson was a hero of mine because he was a Palace left back, and he got a torrid time. And there was nobody that really ran Kenny Sampson and made him look like a very average defender. Maradona was just a revelation, and we'd all been hearing about him. And as a young 12-year-old kid, I'd heard about this Maradona character, and then you saw him on the pitch at Wembley, and he was just a mercurial talent.
It was the same at Hampden when he played against Scotland at Hampden. And I remember going down to the news conference in the Central Hotel right beside Glasgow Central Station. And Luque, who was a goal scorer, the man up front with long dark hair.
Leopold Luque.
Luque was at the top table at the press conference, and Maradona was sitting at the back. Just a young kid, just having a look at what the press conference was.
Because it was Luque and Mario Kempes were the stars of the 78 World Cup, weren't they?
Yeah. And then Maradona was quite magnificent on the pitch at Hampden. But George Best, you have to go back to 2005. This is good. This is George Best when he was on talkSPORT at that time, and he was talking to Rodney Marsh.
What would you want people to think of you?
I don't know. Well, I know what they will think. They forget all the rubbish when I'm gone, and they'll remember the football. It's as simple as that. I mean, I don't give a toss about everything else. As long as I remember the football, and if only one person thinks I was the best player in the world, that'll do for me, because that's what it was all about, as far as I'm concerned.
By the way, pal, there's more than one person who thinks you're the greatest player in the world. We've had thousands and thousands of emails and texts today, pal.
Pelé actually said that, didn't he?
He did. I found out it was amazing because I didn't know this. I was away somewhere, and an ex-footballer came up to me and introduced himself. I couldn't remember who it was, but he came up to me and said he'd been on a dinner in New York, and Pelé was guest of honour, and quite a few of his ex-Brazilian teammates were there, and he stood up to say a few words and do a question and answer, and one of the questions was, who was the greatest footballer he'd ever seen? And they're all sitting there like Garincha and Rivellino and Didi and Fava.
Beckenbauer.
And he went, George Best. Apparently there was total silence. Which is a hell of a compliment.
George Best in conversation with Rodney Marsh. I mean, amazing. And even then, he was totally reluctant to accept that he was such an iconic figure.
Oh, I think he knew he was an iconic figure. I think he was the fifth Beatle for one period of time, wasn't he? At that time, him and Mike Summerby opening fashion shops in Manchester. And he was such a brilliant footballer. I mean, you've probably seen it. The footage. Have you seen that goal he scored? I think it was for Fort Lauderdale Strikers. He scores a goal that is just unbelievable. The close control, the ability inside. I know it's in American football. I know that at that time the American football was a mile off, but they were all over there. Rodney was over there playing for the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Beckenbauer was playing for the New York Cosmos with Pele. Trevor Francis was playing for the Detroit Express. Peter Beardsley was playing for the Vancouver Whitecaps. That time when British players were going over there playing football, and Georgie Best was playing over there. I think that's how he met Milan Mandaric. He met Milan Mandaric, I think, playing for the San Jose Earthquakers or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And of course, they reacquainted themselves back in the UK when Milan bought Portsmouth.
I mean, it's not really brutal, but are we guilty of looking back at players like Best and Maradona with rose-tinted glasses?
No. Why?
I mean,
why would you say that?
Well, it's obvious why. Because behind the scenes, you could argue that both of them let themselves down in such a way.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
On numerous occasions.
They were flawed geniuses.
Behaviourally.
Yeah, you mean they hurt themselves?
Yes.
They hurt themselves with their activity off the field. And to some extent, Maradona on the field. But they, like most geniuses in sport, they come with another side. There's a conflict of interests in being a genius against what it takes to be one. And that means that you're wired differently, and that means you are subjected to certain extremes in your life. George's was alcohol, and that brought him down and destroyed his life. And at 59 years of age, we lost George Best. And I met George on several occasions. Ironically, I dated Alex for some time, and I saw some of the worst of George at that time. But as a footballer, which we're talking about now, my father loved him. I grew up watching him and spending time watching him. And I grew up in the era of the Kevin Keegans and the world and people of that nature that you admired. And Georgie Best wasn't just an icon because he came out of the 60s and because of that Manchester United side that won the 68 European Cup and because of all the wonderful players around him. It's because he was so bloody good. And Pele doesn't give you that accolade for no reason. It wasn't a charitable vote. And Maradona, as a player, put aside their failings, because those without failings are always those that never try anything. And of course, they've got conflict in their personalities. But when it came down to it, when you distill it to what they could do in a football field,
of course,
these were brilliant players. And George Best would have been an absolute superstar beyond all superstars if he was playing in modern football. With the technology, the pitches, the carpets they play on now, with the defenders that apologise for tackling you.
I think Maradona's still a cheat in Terry Butcher's eyes.
Well, he is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make him not a brilliant footballer, does it?
Our next studio guest, football finance and legal expert Stefan Borson, was in this very studio last week before the vote. Now the vote has happened, Stefan has come back in to see us because the vote on Friday was to replace PSR. It went ahead in the end. PSR, remember, that is profits and sustainability rules. What has happened there? Well, forget PSR because now it's all about SCR. What is that? Squad cost ratio. In came that. Anchoring wasn't for them, but squad cost ratio very much was. SCR passed 14-6 with Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, Palace and Fulham, along with Leeds, all voting against. Why was that? We'll get to that. But SCR, what is it? And when is it integrated into English football? Those are my two opening questions to you, Mr. Borson, and I know you can handle them admirably. So what is it? And when do we see it?
Well, first of all, we see it next season, although teams that breach the 85% or 70% cap, depending on whether they're in UEFA competition, they won't suffer any of the financial penalties next season. So only a very egregious breach of the 115% or the 100% limit would see a points deduction. Now, we now have for the first time points deductions that are spelled out in the rules. So you get a 6-point deduction plus another point for every £6.5 million over the limit. That said, I doubt anybody will ever fail sufficiently to get a points deduction. The way the rules are constructed, it seems to me that it would take some pretty extraordinary spending for somebody to breach. And because of the scale of those penalties, I think it's unlikely that anybody would risk it. In terms of what it is, effectively is a simplification of former rules in that it only looks at certain elements of a club's financial performance. It looks at its revenue, its player trading profit over a 3-year period, and then it sets against that the amount of money that it spends on players. So that's the first team squad, the manager, none of the coaching staff, and the amortization cost that's accrued on the books. So effectively, and a little bit of agent fees, although we have some of the agent fees are already in the amortization. So effectively what you have is all of the debt cost stripped out. So for Manchester United, we used to have to consider how much debt, how much interest they were paying. Don't need to worry about any of that anymore. We don't have to worry, again, if you look at Manchester United using the excuse around PSR to sack 200 people, they don't need to worry about any of those operating costs anymore.
Right.
They're now out of the way for squad cost ratios. And it's effectively a simplification because you don't take into account things like the sale of a stadium, a hotel. You don't take into account the sale of the women's team. Those are not in the equation.
Right.
So it's a simplification in some ways. But of course, any of these systems, finding one size that fits all is always very difficult.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So why do Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, Palace, Fulham and Leeds not want it?
I think they've all got their own reasons. I think for the 3Bs, the Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, who arguably are the 3 best run clubs, all things considered, I think for them, PSR was working. They were well within the limits. The player trading that all of those clubs were in, were involved in, was working very well for them. And so they didn't need a change of system. I think Crystal Palace, there's probably some kind of looking forward and also some kind of political aspect to it, because if you remember, we spoke about Tim Lewis and Arsenal. We understand generally from the media, I think Matt Slater wrote about Parish being particularly upset about the anchoring not being voted through. So I think perhaps for Palace, it was kind of, if we're not having anchoring, then we're not having squad cost ratios and we'll bring it all back at another stage. Leeds is a slightly more sort of confusing one. I'm not sure why Leeds would specifically have voted against SCR, because I don't think that the old system worked particularly well for them. So, but look, in any of these things, all the people around the table have their own perspective because they have to fight for themselves. And obviously it was a very narrow vote in the end. Fulham have historically always voted against these mechanisms. So they voted against PSR back in 2012.
Right. I mean, you mentioned hotels, sale of hotels and all that. PSR was criticised for being restrictive. And some felt it kept the elite and the cartel together. This suits the big boys, Stefan, doesn't it? Let's cut to the chase. Sam Wallace in the Telegraph. The biggest clubs with access to Champions League and FIFA Club World Cup revenue can spend 85% of a turnover, which is much more money than the lower earning clubs with smaller stadiums and much smaller commercial deal.
Well, they can spend 70% because they're in UEFA competition, so you can't have it both ways. But you know, there is a scenario. He's right. I mean, the article, it's a good piece. The article, aside from that, if it was 85%, again, it comes back to one size not fitting all. I mean, actually, I've done some estimates about how it might look in a couple of years' time. It's very difficult because you're forecasting out 2 years. But actually, the teams that are in the kind of yellow zone between definitely okay and, you know, might be a little bit over and have to use some of this allowance that they've got.
Yeah.
Actually, those teams are City, United, Chelsea, Arsenal are very close, Liverpool are very close. So the actual big teams, because they're restricted right back to 70%, they don't have huge buffers in this new system either. In fact, the teams that have the biggest buffers on the current estimates are those teams that voted against, ironically.
We've had enough. Manchester City and the 115 charges. When do we know? Now, that's not just from fans of other clubs, Stefan. Many messages coming in from Man City fans themselves. When do we find out? How much longer can this go? We're getting close to getting out of this current year. Is it going to be early next year? When is it?
Well, look, nobody knows.
Why?
I've told you before. Because even the parties themselves expected to have been told by now. So that's the reality.
So who's holding it up?
All the lawyers are surprised that there is no decision at this stage, and that's on both sides. Who is holding it up? I'll tell you who's holding it up. The panel that's making the decisions holding it up. They hold the pen. So they are the people who everybody waits for to deliver the decision.
So
who's
the panel? Who is the panel?
Well, we don't know. Nobody controls. We know the long list. I mean, you can sort of cobble it together from all of the people on the judicial panel, but we don't know who is on that list. We can make some guesses that it's probably 2 lawyers and maybe 1 accountant, but we don't know who's on the panel. We don't know what they were told to produce by when. We can now assume, I think, given that it's been so long and given that everybody's so surprised that they don't have a decision, that actually there's very little guidance given to them and they weren't effectively paid for their time from the moment the case ended, the hearing ended. Arguably, the Premier League and Manchester City together with the panel should have agreed a process whereby the hearing ends and then effectively they're exclusively paid to deliberate and to produce over, let's say, 3 months or at worst 6 months and deliver it during the close season. That is one possibility that could have happened. Now, maybe these people on the panel had other engagements. Maybe that wasn't in the terms. They shouldn't have been engaging, should they? Well, I agree, but I guess a lot of the rules have changed around how you engage the panels and the arbitrators in these cases. They've actually tweaked a lot of these rules in the Premier League rules. And maybe it's as a response to the fact that they have made mistakes in the past.
Yeah.
I say it's down to both parties to have agreed a process by which, and I said this right at the start, there should have been a public announcement about the timetable. So everybody knew it was going to come out at a certain time.
Exactly. This is your world, Stefan. You operate in this world. To the man in the street, the woman in the street that supports a football club, this is unacceptable, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's more, we if this was a trial in the High Court, this would be the earliest part that it could be, you would get a decision. So if you want to upset the man on the street, it's actually worse in the outside world. This is a private arbitration, and I would say of sorts, it's actually disciplinary, but for all intents and purposes, it's a private arbitration. I would say that makes it even more imperative that it was done within a commercial timetable. That commercial timetable should have been to fit in with the football timetable. It should have been orderly and it should have been announced. But we've not been in that situation. We don't know why the decision has not actually yet been finalised. It's not impossible that, for example, one of the 3 panel members is sick or has got other engagements or has ended up in a trial that's gone on longer than expected.
Stefan,
it is possible.
What we're getting, the sick note excuse.
Well, it is possible. The other logical outcome is that it's quite hard to understand. I mean, it's a private arbitration. They're paid by the day, the hour,
right,
to produce a decision.
Well, it's great work if you can get it.
So how can it possibly take now almost a year from the end of the hearing? Is
it possible they've reached a verdict and haven't gone public yet?
Not according to my information. According to my information, that neither party, my information's about a week out of date, but so it's possible that in the last week they've had it, but as of a week ago, the parties had not had the decision. So it wasn't a case of there's negotiations going on in the background. It's nothing more than the fact that the decision was not out with those parties.
I remember you had a little snigger when Simon suggested could well be end of the decade.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got 5 years left, so I'm still feeling confident about the bet.
Someone can't be that sick.
You have to say, Simon is increasingly becoming right about the length of this process. If the decision comes out, let's say, I think Simon thinks it's going to come out next year. I think it still could come out before Christmas. Probably
this Christmas.
Yeah, it should do. The decision has been imminent for quite some time. There's not a lot that they can do. It doesn't take
What are
that
you
long.
laughing at, incidentally?
Well, I'm just laughing at the fact it's a badly conducted process from the grandstanding of charging with 115 offences, which is already flawed in its thinking and created a set of challenges for the incoming panel, through to not determining the panel and the directive that you wanted to put them under. This is poor from the Premier League.
Yeah.
You want to go after Man City, you want to go after them with 115 charges and make a big song and dance about it, then you need to do it properly. Okay, Man City can come to the party and potentially be part of the conversation about when an outcome should be determined, but they're coming there reluctantly. So it was incumbent upon the Premier League to be, not to be opaque, to be transparent, go, right, this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, and by the way, this is the panel, not necessarily by name, but this is the panel, it's directive. And this is when they'll come out with an outcome. That should have been determined.
Well,
It's not difficult.
I think they could have announced the identity of the panel as well. I mean, we're going to find out who they are when the decision comes out. They're going to be there.
Possibly.
And maybe you don't want people trying to, get
Influence.
to them.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. But I think it's all parties. As Simon says, the Premier League. I think it's incumbent on all the parties. City were reluctant to obviously be in the hearing. They're obviously reluctant to have 115 charges. But once they're there...
Someone had to lead it. If the Premier League led it and Man City were resistant to it, if Premier League said to Man City, by the basis of this hearing, we are going to have an outcome in 6 months, and Man City tried to block it like they've tried to block everything, which is not cooperate, try and stop the media from having any visibility and do whatever else Man City do, then that could have been clearly evidenced. But right now where we are is the Premier League are leading this process. They're the ones that brought the charges. It was incumbent upon them to set the framework and Man City perhaps to concur with it.
Yeah, I mean, just game this out as well. I mean, let's say you're right and it's coming out next year. Well, when is it going to come out? Are they actually going to drop this right in the middle of the culmination of the season? Right. So, okay, City may not be involved in a title race at that point. They may be, they may not be.
But is it the panel's
But there might be the champion, might be a Champions League, on the day of a semi-final of the Champions League. It's nonsense.
But surely it's not the panel's responsibility to concur with the compliance of a football calendar. It's just got to bring out its outcome.
Well, I've argued, this is. I think there's no obligation on them to, but I think it would be obviously incredibly sensible for all the parties. This is a commercial arbitration.
This
is not the High Court. Yeah, but it's not the High Court. They're being paid by the Premier League in the process. So, yes, they should be cognizant of the football calendar.
It's not the High Court, but there's even more visibility, more scrutiny on this than any High Court trial, because people are more fixated on what the outcome of sport is. So they should be operating at an even higher level. And to get someone into... I've done it. It doesn't take forever and a day. I got someone... You've had this discussion. I got Dowie into court within a year. And got an outcome within 3 months on a very difficult case, so it's not unachievable.
Different court system in those days, but anyway, It's not courts, right? They're setting this up themselves. It should be quicker.
It's probably done. And you think we might know before Christmas?
Well, I think it's due.
It's imminent.
Right, it's due. Everybody's expecting it.
He's been saying each quarter for the last year.
No, of course that's true. I've been saying for more or less since the summer that it's imminent, and I believe it is still imminent. And that's really just repeating what the parties themselves also believe.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where even if it wasn't imminent, there's only a certain amount of time it can take to write up a decision. They've had a year nearly.